What is a hyperdimensional being? Well, a hyperdimensional being is an entity, a sentience, like an intelligent sentience that exists in hyperdimensions. So what is a hyperdimension? Well, we live in a world of three dimensions. There's width, there's length, and there's depth. A world of three dimensions. So, in a world of four dimensions or five dimensions, well, that's a hyperdimension. Anything outside of the three dimensions that we live in. So, this fascinates me. You can look at it from different ways. You can look at, first of all, you can look at hyperdimensions from a mathematical, a logical way. And then you can look at it from kind of a scientific way. And then you can look at it from a spiritual way. So, and at some point there's convergences in all three perspectives. And there's, plenty of literature and thought, in perhaps even encounters or empirical observation, at least on the physical and the spiritual portion. So, what could a hyperdimensional being be? A hyperdimensional being might be described as an angel, as a demon, as perhaps alien. Some people feel that ET or extraterrestrials are hyperdimensional, or that some of the extraterrestrial encounters are encounters with hyperdimensional beings. Spirits, ghosts. What else? Yeah. So those are some of the phrases or terms that may have been used, over history to describe potential hyperdimensional beings. So when you start thinking about hyperdimensions, when I start thinking about hyperdimensions, one of the first things that opened my mind to the thought of hyperdimensions and hyperdimensional beings was reading the book Flatlands. So the book Flatlands, it was written like in Victorian times, turn of the century, or whenever, a long time ago, and it's about a world of two-dimensional beings, where an imaginary world of two-dimensional geometric figures. So there's squares, circles, hexagons, triangles, and now a side note of the book Flatlands, how many sides a figure had determines its class in society. So then the more sides you have, the more class, or the higher up the social structure you are. So, a triangle has 3 sides, and whereas a square has 4. And, hexagons, the more, gons, hexagons, octagons, etc. The greater up the class structure. And the highest class being the circle, because a circle has infinite sides. So in a way. So in Flatlands, two-dimensional beings, they live in a two-dimensional world, but they can only perceive in one dimension. So a circle seeing another circle, a circle is going to perceive a circle or as a line, because the circle only sees in 2 dimensions, so it sees lengths. It's going to perceive another circle as a line. And in the book, the points of light, or the brightness of the line, is kind of a depth cue. So a circle appraising another circle would see a line, and with a line but kind of tapering off. Whereas seeing a square would be just a line, and the line, the light or illumination of the line is solid, because the square has no, how could I say this? Just bear with me. The light of the line would be solid. The illumination of the line would be solid for a square. But for a circle, if you are a two-dimensional being and you're on the same plane, observing a circle, you're going to see a line, and the thickness or the illumination is going to taper where the circle curves. So anyway, so the character in Flatlands goes into this state where he perceives or can communicate with two-dimensional beings. And these two-dimensional beings, they only perceive in one dimension. And so they only see things, they might be lines, the two-dimensional beings, but they only see things in terms of dots, single points, And so a line perceiving another line in a one-dimensional world only sees a dot. So, and also the two-dimensional being has an encounter with a being in the third dimension of 3 dimensions. Let's say a spear. So when the spear comes into the world of the two-dimensional being, the spear kind of dips or passes through the two-dimensional plane. So imagine this is the two-dimensional plane, and it has length and it has width, the two-dimensional plane, and the spear passes through. So as the spear passes through, he's going to appear to creatures on the two-dimensional plane as a two-dimensional figure that varies in diameter. When the spear passes, the tip of the lowest point of the spear has the smallest diameter, which is just a point. So as it passes through the two-dimensional plane, it's going to appear to people on that two-dimensional plane as a radius that increases. So as it's starting with a small tip, as it passes through, then the radius is going to increase. And then as it passes through, it gets smaller. But remember, they see in one dimension. So they're not even going to see a circle. They're going to see a line. They're going to see as the three-dimensional being passes through their two-dimensional world, they're only going to perceive it in one dimension. So they're going to perceive a line. Starts as a dot, then that line's going to get bigger, and then get smaller. It's going to get longer and shorter to a point as the three-dimensional sphere passes through the two-dimensional plane and is observed by the two-dimensional beings who only see in one dimension. So this is a logical way, to a mathematical, geometrical way to imagine, to visualize 3 dimensions and to visualize perception up to 3 dimensions. So remember, we are 3-dimensional beings, but we only perceive 2 dimensions. So, of course, our brain gives us cues, just like in the 2-dimensional creatures, even though they only perceive in 1 dimension, their brain gives them cues in that 1 dimension to cue the concept of the 2nd dimension. So the same way we see in 2 dimensions, but our brain takes the information and gives us cues so we can process the 3rd dimension. So that's 3 dimensions. That's how you can imagine. Now, how do you imagine a 4th dimension? That's difficult for me. I've seen several videos on YouTube where people do graphics and visualizations about how to begin to perceive 4th dimensions, or at least how to begin to perceive a 4th dimension geometrical figure passing through our plane, our 3-dimensional plane. So the same way that the 3-dimensional figure, the sphere, passes through the 2 dimensions, and it's going to appear, if you only perceive in 1 dimension, it's going to appear like a line going big and small. If you perceive in 2 dimensions, you'll see a circle, of increasing diameter. So as it passes through if you can see the 2 dimensions, so here's the 2 dimensions in a diagonal, and the sphere is passing through, you can see the small circle get bigger. Visualizing a 4th dimensional object passing through our 3-dimensional world. I've seen some graphics or some visualizations that try to show that or kind of show that, and I might try to get some of that on here for you guys, but you just have to use your imagination for now, and you just have to kind of believe that, that logically 4 dimensions can be, understand your limits as a 3-dimensional being that only perceives in 2 dimensions, and you kind of have to go on a limb and believe that logically 4 dimensions, geometrically 4 dimensions can exist, and perhaps even 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 dimensions. So Another place where physics or the physical world or physical scientists, that's kind of the world of the mathematician and the logician. But where physics and physical scientists, they start talking about multiple dimensions. I'm going to give a poor explanation of this, the concept of superstrings. Now, the way I understand that is that you physicists out there, and you popular physicists, and you amateur and you closet physicists, feel free to give a better definition, a better discussion, or make a response video. I'm open and welcome to it. So the whole point of everything that I present to you guys is to encourage a discussion. And I'm looking to learn. I'm looking to learn as much as I wouldn't say I'm trying to teach. I'm more trying to share and wishing to open discussions and learn and do my part to create a community that discusses these things. So matter is composed of atoms. You got neutrons, electrons, and protons. And these neutrons, electrons, and protons are composed of subatomic particles or quarks. And supposedly, I'm going to give the best explanation I can, is that these subatomic particles, at the most tiniest portion, what they represent are waves or strings that vibrate in multiple dimensions. And when they hit our dimension, think of it almost like a jump rope. And the jump rope has ink or paint on it, and you're whipping the jump rope in a wave on the concrete. And every time it hits that jump rope hits the concrete, it leaves a dot. So you'll see a bunch of dots. Dot, 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 dot. So supposedly these strings are whipping in multiple dimensions, vibrating in multiple dimensions, and when they hit our dimension, that is the subatomic particle, the most minutia of subatomic particles. And that's what our world is composed of. So anyone that can give a better definition, please feel free. I'm sure you can give a more accurate definition, of course, an accurate and digestible definition is most welcome. So here, science, empirical science, physicists, theoretical, empirical, recognize or conceive of the concept of hyperdimensions, multiple dimensions. So then you get into the spiritualist and those people that, believe in magic and spiritualism, occultism, and they've been talking about hyperdimensions since the dawn of man, dawn of civilization. But when they talk about hyperdimensions, they talk about, other worlds that exist in the fabric of this world, worlds worlds, realities, existences. So, and in those worlds are beings, angels, demons, spirits, gods, whatever that pretty much covers everything. Angels, demons, spirits, gods. So, that either live in these other worlds and or live and come into our world, interact with us. So, and then souls, that's another one. And there are some schools of thought or some people that feel or believe that we ourselves, there's more to us than just us, that we ourselves are projections of a hyperdimensional being. So that I am a hyperdimensional being projected into this three-dimensional world. Whether that's the soul inhabiting the body. Is the body a three-dimensional manifestation, a three-dimensional projection of a hyperdimensional soul? Some people talk about the fourth dimension being time. So am I a projection? I'm a projection on the three dimensions. And as I age, or as I move through time, I'm a projection of a spiritual being, a hyperdimensional being that either passes through, that its movement through a three-dimensional plane, its movement through a three-dimensional plane is my existence in that three-dimensional plane. Are there dimensions, hyper beings that they live in six dimensions? The sixth dimension, they interact through the fifth, the fourth, and the third. Are they only? How does that work? I don't know, but I can't give you a cosmology. I can't give you a construct. I can't give you answers. what I only want to do for myself and for you is to open your imagination and get you thinking about these things. And don't take for granted that there are only 3 dimensions. Don't take for granted that sentience, life, only exists in this plane that you can perceive. Be open to the possibility, at least with your imagination, that there's life and forms and beings all around you, like in this room, right in front of you, all around you, that exist in hyperdimensions that you can't perceive. Maybe they interact in this dimension, maybe they don't. So there's a lot of, thought or talk that, this world is run by hyperdimensional beings, that nations are run by hyperdimensional beings, that various aspects of our personalities at various times are controlled or influenced by hyperdimensional beings. There's some people that feel that they've had encounters or they can perceive hyperdimensional beings, things like DMT or ayahuasca or, years and years of meditation, acid trips, mushrooms, these are things I haven't done, so I don't really know for sure. And, but this is something that, I would like to spend some more time, as in, the rest of my life, learning more about, and at least being exposed to the different literature and exposed to people that, different perspectives and different tales and stories and encounters and theories, because it's very plausible to me. It's very believable to me. I'll go as far as to say I believe in hyperdimensional beings. I definitely, I feel like if I can imagine hyperdimensions, they exist, even though it's hard for me to physically wrap my mind, my very limited, constrained, 3-dimensional monkey mind, around a hyperdimensional hyperdimension, much less a hyperdimensional being. I'm going to be open to the fact that there are things that exist that I may not be able to wrap my mind around. So this is going to be an ongoing topic. We're going to talk a lot. This isn't the definite video about hyperdimensional beings. I'm just opening the floor for what I believe is going to be a lifelong conversation, with the world, you viewers, the world, a lifelong conversation, a lifelong discovery, mankind's, one small little drop in mankind's expansion or rediscovery, because I think a lot of this stuff, and convergence, a lot of the stuff we've known, I think that we've forgotten, mankind has forgotten, humankind, we have forgotten more than we've learned, So I think that we knew more maybe 10,000 years ago about many deep things that we know now. So, however, we've learned new things. So what's important now is a convergence. We're using different parts of the brain, different parts. We're interacting with nature and the universe differently. So what's happening is this convergence between science and magic, science and spiritualism, science and magic. Magic meaning the intuitive perception of the unknown. Science is really a logical discipline. So one of these days we're going to talk more about exactly what science is, the scientific method. And because I feel like people throw science around loosely. So we're going to talk about exactly what the difference is at some point in time. Exactly what the difference, what science is. Very specifically what science is. But meanwhile, the door is open regarding hyperdimensional beings. I really want to hear your comments and your thoughts and your questions about hyperdimensional beings in the comment section below. And also I want you to subscribe to my channel, Cosmic Mystic, The Cosmic Mystic. And folks, let's talk about it. Hyperdimensional being. Cosmic Mystic, signing out.